Hello and welcome. What we're going to be looking at in this lesson is we're going to be looking at the different powers that the Constitution possesses. So the Constitution itself is broken into multiple parts. The Constitution contains the preamble, which we looked at in our very first lesson as far as the things that the government must uphold. We've got the 7 articles that have multiple sections. These articles are what sets out the framework and structure of the government. And then we have the 27 amendments that have been added to the Constitution that we looked at in the previous 2 lessons. So what are the articles of the Constitution? The articles of the Constitution looks at all of the different parts of the government. So Article 1 looks at the rules and responsibilities of Congress. Article 2 concerns the rules and responsibility of the President. Article 3 concerns the rules and responsibilities of the judiciary. Article 4 concerns the relationship between the central and state governments, which we're going to refer to as federalism. Article 5 concerns the ratification of amendments to the Constitution, which we looked at in our previous lesson when we looked at the 4 different avenues of which an amendment can be passed. We've got Article 6 that establishes that the laws of the central government are the law of the land. And then Article 7 concerns how the Constitution will be ratified. So here's the preamble again, as we looked at before, that states, "We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, to ordain and establish the Constitution for the United States of America." So what are the different types of powers? Well, the first one we're going to look at here is the concept of enumerated powers, which can also be referred to as delegated powers or express powers. These are powers that are specifically outlined by the Constitution. These powers are an explicit list of things that the central government has that is allowed to do. So when you look at these terms, these are the things that the government or the Constitution can do, and we know that they can do it because it specifically says that they can do these things within the document. And we'll look at lists of these as we go through each individual branch of government throughout the year. Then we got the idea of implied powers. These powers are not directly outlined in the Constitution, but are suggested based upon the expressed power. And there are a couple of different ways that we can express what implied power means as well. Implied powers are supported by the necessary and proper clause located in Section 8 of the Constitution. This states that Congress has the ability to do anything that is necessary and proper in order to carry out any expressed power. So if we look at this, for example, one of the express powers that Congress has is the ability to create a post office. Now, when you look at the idea of creating a post office, in order to have a well-running post office, 1, you've got to have a building. 2, you've got to pay the workers. You've got to get ways to be able to transport the mail. You've got to have routes. You establish zip codes. You do all of these different things. Now, none of those things are expressly stated within the Constitution that you have the right to do those things. But we know that in order to be able to establish a post office, all of those things must be put into place. So those things are necessary and proper to be able to do that. So that's where one of the reasons why we get the concept of an implied power. The Constitution also states that it is this is also known as the elastic clause. So we have the ability to stretch what we know we have to do in order to get done the things that are necessary and proper. We also have what's referred to as an inherent power. An inherent power the idea, the way I always explain it, is it's the rights and rules that a country is born with. So this is the idea that these are rules that all countries have the ability to be able to use. So they have the ability to regulate immigration. They have the ability to deport undocumented aliens, the right to acquire territory. And this is the right or the power that Thomas Jefferson cites when he makes the Louisiana Purchase. A country has the right to protect itself against rebellions, and it has the right to recognize other countries, because a country does not exist until another country recognizes it as such. We also have concurrent powers. Concurrent powers are powers that are held by both the national government and state governments at the same time. Some examples of powers that are held by both the state government and the federal government at the same time are levying and collecting taxes, borrowing money, establishing courts, defining crimes and setting punishments, claiming private property for public use, which once again, remember, is referred to as eminent domain. This is the federal concept of our government in action, because what a federal government is, it's a government that has a central power and state power at the same time, that all have jurisdiction over the same people and the same territory, but they share rights and sometimes have distinct differences between the rights. In Article 7 of the Constitution, we have what is referred to as the Supremacy Clause. The Supremacy Clause recognizes the Constitution is the rule of law. However, what it states is it says that any federal law that is passed is the supreme law of the land, and no state has the ability to be able to circumvent that constitutional concept. This is supported by the court case of McCulloch versus Maryland. In the court case of McCulloch versus Maryland, Maryland tried to impose a law that stated that they would not recognize any banknote that had been created outside of the state of Maryland. Now, this was looked at as being a direct attack on the national bank and any banknotes that they had created. This court case goes all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court determines that no state has the power to be able to pass a law that is in contradiction to a federal law. We also have the idea that the Constitution contains what is referred to as the full faith and credit clause. Each state is required to recognize the official documents and civil judgments rendered by the courts of other states. So, if you get married in a state and move to another state, that must be recognized by the new state that you go to. If you get divorced in one state and then go to another state, that state must recognize that divorce. Any other contract that you enter into must be recognized in other states as well. You also have the idea of privileges and immunities. This is a provision of the Constitution affording citizens of each state the privileges of citizens of other states, meaning that if I go from Florida to Georgia, that I am protected by those Georgia laws even though I'm not a Georgia citizen.